Are you ready for the first ever Big Data Scala conference? All right. So I'm Alexey Krabrov. I'm Chief Scientist at Nitro and also the founder of SF Scala and the Scala by the Bay series. This year we have the longest Scala sequence in human history, and we're in its final third part, right, which is completely new this year. So first of all, we have Wi-Fi, and here's a quiz. If the network name is Scala, what's the password? Exactly. So it's good. It should be available in all areas. Let us know if it's not. Something wants to tell me that it wants a different. No, okay, it's good. So that's the Wi-Fi. All right. I want to thank several people who made this conference a reality. Right. It started as just a kind of an idea, a glimpse of collaboration. There is a software engineer, his name is Anatoly Fomenko. He's a software engineer at Cloudera, and he's really enthusiastic about Scala. So he approached TypeSafe with an idea that Cloudera would host Martin Dursky, and TypeSafe forwarded this to me to connect SF Scala with Cloudera, and Cloudera at the time could offer pretty small room, 80 people. Like we regularly gather hundreds. So one thing led to the other, and here we are with a full 2-day Big Data Scala conference. And Cloudera is a partner. Justin Kestelin is the director of developer relations. He's manning the booth out there. Say hi to him. So basically, we finalized and developed this idea with Justin. Mike Olson and Martin Dursky were early committers to this idea and basically promised to deliver their keynotes. And I think if you think of two people who together form this phrase "Big Data Scala" in human form, I think these guys are right. So we have some very interesting keynote speakers today, and I also want to say thank you to Cloudera and Nitro for the partnerships. I want to thank Nitro CTO Ticho Bajic for community stewardship vision that basically followed from last year's sponsorship of Nitro, of last year's Scala by the Bay. It basically led for me joining Nitro, and Nitro fully supports our community initiatives, our meetups. We expanded the scope and areas of the meetup, so that was a really great year. And Nitro just hosted Scala by the Bay, which was held here last week. How many people here were at Scala by the Bay? How many people here are the first time at our conference? Okay, so we have a pretty good, about 50-50, I would say. So you're in for some serious fun. What is this whole thing about, right? So there is the rise of Big Data Scala happening across the Bay Area and the world. I think Apache Spark is really what drives this. And so there is this facetious acronym, SMAC, which, for the lack of a better one, we can use. And this is in one instantiation. We have a Spark, Mesos, Akka, Cassandra, and Kafka pipeline. We did a training on this yesterday. So this is a fairly standard data pipeline built by companies like Pinterest, who need web scale APIs and who basically have millions of users working in real time, whose actions should be processed with some kind of predictive analytics, some kind of recommendations. And there is another facetious innovation of this, SMAC Hard, which is highly available, resilient, and distributed SMAC, which is an enterprise version, right? But we're not going into this right now. So I've seen recently what happens with Spark. There is a meetup called Bay Area Spark Meetup, which I started in 2012 as an offshoot of SF Scala. And what I've seen recently happening, it basically outgrew Scala by a factor of 2. So SF Scala is the biggest meetup in the world. It has about 2,700 members. The Spark meetup at this point have about 5,000 members. Their show to RCP ratio is much lower, so I don't know how many of these guys are actually coming to the group, but it's an indication that there is a tremendous amount of interest in Spark. And what often happens is that these guys who come to the Spark meetup they realized that Spark is written in Scala. So a few days later, they join the Scala meetup. So there is this interesting sequence how Spark is driving Scala. And obviously there is a reason, because Spark is written in Scala. So because it's written in Scala and there are multiple other systems written in Scala, we're at the point where we can basically pass around objects retaining their types, which is really interesting, which is really important, right? So the way traditional big data is done, a bunch of text is dumped in HDFS and then reparsed back. And you waste compute, you waste basically your constraints. If you stay within a typeful pipeline, you don't need to do this. And I think this is one of the key ideas we want you guys to remember and take home from this conference. The other is that data science on the JVM is a reality. Although the majority of data scientists are now working in languages like Python and R, we believe that it is fully feasible today to do everything you need in data science while being in JVM and working in Scala. And we'll have some good examples of this throughout the conference. So I have a question for you. How much data is big data? Can anybody venture a guess or a definition? 20 gigabytes, said Johnson John. Anybody else? Going once? Twice? 20 gigabytes. Why 20 gigabytes, John? A hexabyte. Well, I mean, like, is this going by size? Like, what is a good way to define this? So we had this discussion. I put it actually to a class in Berkeley I taught last fall. And somebody said, like, all the data in the universe. Undergrads are really interesting. Right? Let's say all the data on my laptop, all the data in the universe, the number of grains of sand. People in the industry said, somebody said, big data is enough data to make money with it, or something like this, right? So, and another person said, big data is the amount of data which you cannot afford, right? So there was clearly this economic definition, but what I'm driving at, we need to think about it. We can't just take it at face value, right? Big data is certainly a hype term, and what's interesting about this group of people that we have certain values, and you guys, half of you who are just coming to the Scala conference, I will kind of repeat what I said at Scala by the Bay, but I think it's worth reiterating. So there are certain shared values which we share and uphold in the Scala community. First of all, it's functional programming with everything which comes around it and specific shapes of this user refresh and transparency. Then we really care about abstractions. So folks are really working hard to make things very concise, very reusable, and also not to repeat themselves. So clarity of code is a value, reuse, and documentation is becoming an even higher priority. So we've seen at the talks like CATS that people are really striving to make their documentation compilable. They want the beginners to feel welcome, and things like Scala Z, were too complex. So CATS and other libraries trying to start from the very beginning with abundant newbie-friendly documentation, which is automatically compiled so all the examples work, right? So I think this is a very good direction we're going in. Another thing this community does very naturally, it basically formalizes various concepts and frameworks. When we do streaming, we don't just do it, we think about it, the proper way to do it, and we compare various ways to do this. And we have very good formulas. We can express them as DSLs. We have a very expressive type system, so we can basically formalize various ways of doing it as code, and then we can run it and then we can compare it. And we're doing the same with things like parallelism and all kinds of data processing. So I think this is the value which this community brings to big data community. And overall, we can just formulate this as thoughtfulness. So we won't just accept big data on its face value. We'll ask, what does it mean? We did an example of this yesterday. So yesterday was a fairly unprecedented training, a complete pipeline training. How many people were at the training yesterday? So a good amount, right? So we basically trained 100 people on the whole SMAC stack. And obviously it was the first time we've done it. We had a Docker, Nitro's own Ben Ryskovsky, who is a Docker guru, helped us really put together a wonderful setup. And essentially most people were able to go through the whole thing. And play with machine learning in a Spark notebook. Basically bringing data all the way from ingestion through Akka into Kafka into Spark and Cassandra and look at it with a notebook. We have great events coming next year, following this year. So Scala and Big Data Scala coming back, so we'll keep this sequence. In April, we held Text by the Bay, which is the first NLP conference for startups, bringing together advanced users of text. And next year, we're expanding it to 4 days. One day will be Text by the Bay, another artificial intelligence, which is basically everything which is not text, which is vision and speech, IoT, smart home, and things like that. Genomics, we have a sizable group of folks here applying Spark and Scala to genomic problems. And democracy, we have actually a good group of startups such as Brigade and Signal Labs who are measuring voter sentiment, who are posing various electoral issues to the voters. And obviously, this is an election year. We have the chief data scientist of GOP present at Strata in February, and apparently all the parties and all the candidates are looking at data mining as a tool in elections, and so we're going to have data on that. Open source is going really strong. One thing we don't see yet is the emergence of a reference stack. So if you want to put together your own SMAC stack, you just have to piece it together, and generally, it might take a year and $1 million investment for a company like Pinterest and maybe 5 engineers to put it together. And the question is why? Why do we have to do this all over again? It's generally ending up in a very similar fashion. But what we need to do, we need to add a DevOps component, and we need to add the glue, right? Basically, we need to operationalize the SMAC stack and make an open source version which a company like Nitro can take and use. So we started this alliance of like-minded project we call Framework Foundation. If you're interested in this, go to this actually URL. And we'll start with an alliance of like-minded projects. So if you're interested, you can see the list of projects, you can see the folks in the steering committee, and you can see some contact information. Another initiative is noetl.org, and basically it's a site for you to submit your horror story about ETL. So, if you have an interesting story how ETL went wrong, please go to noetl.org and click submit and write it up. Open Genomics is another volunteer group centered around bringing skills for Scala and Spark to help defeat cancer. So you'll hear more about this, but we're very excited about this. This is a very good way for our community to give back to humankind at large, right? We have the skills required to process genomics data. We have the skills required to match cancer mutations to novel treatments. And we want to ask genomics scientists to teach us, basically to write a big README file. So you can go to GitHub, you can clone it and kind of read the README and work on the problems. And we'll partner with Kaggle to run some competitions around this. And basically, we'll kind of try to bring folks in both fields together. So if you have some spare cycles, you can actually help solve this very important problem. I have a favor to ask you. We'll have a closing panel tomorrow with some great folks from the industry on the panel, and we want some really good questions about everything relating to big data and with a Scala angle and kind of customer focus. So if you have a question, if you have an observation, please go to this URL, bit.ly/ask-big-data, ask big data, and ask a good question. We really need your questions. I want to thank again everybody who made this conference possible. There are speakers. Obviously, without speakers, we cannot do this. So there are some amazing talks. We had great feedback from Scala by the Bay. Think of submitting a talk next year. Trainers who did a great job yesterday. All the sponsors, volunteers, they're in orange shirts like this. I thank you to them. They're manning all the breakfast lines and basically registration and everything else. If there's something you need, ask one of the volunteers. Jeannie is their indefatigable organizer, and Jason is kind of my partner in crime at SF Scala. And of course, all the attendees and all the students, we gave some tickets to students this year, to Women Who Code through General Assembly. We want everybody who wants to come here, to come here. If somebody cannot afford it, If somebody's not aware, please let them know and put them in touch with us, and we'll get them a ticket. Schedule is available online at schedule.devreal.ai. That's an iPhone app. It basically is a website which tells you to save a link as a little iPhone app to your iPhone. The Twitter account for this conference is Big Scala. And the hashtag is also Big Scala with a pound sign. Please use this for all the tweets. All right, and basically, that's all I have. We're a little bit running behind. There are no breaks between keynotes, so there are bounds on the schedule. The keynotes will run as a consecutive sequence. If you are leaving or entering during the talks in this auditorium, please do not use the middle door. Please use the side doors. And also, we should not bring any food or drink into this auditorium. However, it's fine in the other Suite 250. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this conference, you inspire and get inspired and have fun.